Your person did something last night they'll never admit to anyone. Wait. Pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and you probably felt a small flicker of it before you even opened this video. A strange tug in your chest, a name crossing your mind out of nowhere. That faint sense that someone, somewhere just thought about you when they really weren't supposed to. Last night, your person did something they'll never admit to anyone. Not to their friends, not to the people they were sitting with. Not even to themselves when they wake up tomorrow and try to brush it off as nothing. But it wasn't nothing, because someone at that table, someone they didn't expect, said your name out loud. And for 1 second, the whole room kept moving, but they didn't. If this message speaks to your heart, comment "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Now stay with me, because the way this unfolded matters. It wasn't a big night. That's the part most people miss. It wasn't some dramatic event with loud music and bright lights and confessions spilling everywhere. It was just an ordinary night. The kind they've had 100 times before. A few drinks, a familiar booth, people they've known for years. The kind of place where the wood on the table is scratched up from elbows and bottle caps, and the lighting is dim enough that nobody really looks at each other too closely. They were leaning back, half listening, the way people do when they're tired, but pretending they're not. They had that look, you know, the one, where the eyes are open but the mind is somewhere else entirely. They've been carrying something for a while now, something they haven't named yet. And they walked into that night, hoping the noise would drown it out. Then someone said your name, not loudly, not with intention, just in passing. The way names slip into conversations when people are talking about old times, or asking a casual question, or making an offhand comment that wasn't supposed to land anywhere. But it landed. It landed right in the center of their chest, and they weren't ready for it. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here that most people would walk right past. The third party. And it doesn't really matter who, a friend, a cousin. Someone who used to know both of you, said something honest, something simple. Something like, you know, she really did care about you. More than you probably realized at the time. Or maybe it was, I always thought you two had something different. Or maybe it was even quieter than that. Maybe it was a single sentence that wasn't even about you directly, but circled close enough that everyone at that table felt the air change, and your person. They didn't react. That's the thing. They didn't laugh it off. They didn't agree. They didn't disagree. They just went quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. The kind that's loud on the inside. They reached for their drink, took a longer sip than usual, set it back down a little too carefully, and nobody at that table really noticed, because that's how good they've gotten at hiding it. But something inside them had already cracked open, and there was no closing it back up. This is where things quietly began to shift. Because hearing your name from someone else's mouth is different from thinking about you on their own. When they think about you privately, they have control. They can steer the thought wherever they want. They can shut it down, push it away, redirect it. But when someone else brings you up, when your name comes out of a voice that isn't theirs, it strips away all the defenses they've been building for weeks, maybe months. It puts you back in the room with them. And there's nothing they can do about it. They didn't expect this feeling to return. Not like this. Not so suddenly. Not in front of other people, where they couldn't even sit with it properly. They had to keep their face neutral. Keep nodding. Keep pretending the conversation hadn't just rearranged something inside their chest. And that performance, that invisible effort, that's what made the feeling sharper. Because anything you have to hide grows louder in the silence. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. After that moment, they ordered another drink, then another. Not because they wanted to be drunk, because they wanted to soften the edges of what had just been said. They wanted to feel a little less. But that almost never works the way people hope. Alcohol doesn't bury feelings, it exposes them. It pulls back the curtain on everything you've been pretending not to feel. And by the third drink, your person was somewhere else entirely. They were thinking about the way you used to laugh at things that weren't even that funny. The way you tilted your head when you were really listening to them. The way you said their name. They were thinking about a specific conversation, and this is the part that surprised them. A conversation they hadn't thought about in a long time. Maybe it was a small fight. Maybe it was a quiet moment where you said something soft that they brushed off too quickly. Maybe it was the last real conversation before things started slipping. Whatever it was, it came back. Uninvited, detailed, clear. And underneath it, a thought they didn't want to think. Maybe I let go too quickly. This is where understanding slowly begins. The third party's words didn't tell them anything new, you see. That's the strange part. They didn't reveal some hidden truth. They just said out loud what your person had already been quietly carrying around. And sometimes that's the worst kind of moment, when someone else casually voices the thing you've been trying to bury. It exposes you to yourself. It makes the hiding pointless. Because if someone on the outside can see it, then it must be real. It must mean something. And your person sat there at that table, surrounded by familiar faces, feeling more alone than they had in a long time. Not because they were unloved, but because the one person they were thinking about wasn't there. And the strange part is, in that moment, they realized that you not being there had been bothering them more than they'd let themselves know. They started replaying things, not in a dramatic montage, just in flashes, the way real memory works. A song you liked, a small joke, the way you texted them once when they were having a bad day, and how you didn't even ask if they were okay. You just said something kind because you already knew. Little things, small gestures. The kind of details people only remember when they realize what they had. Stay with me here. Because something important is happening underneath all of this. There's a difference between missing someone and finally understanding them. And what shifted in your person last night wasn't really missing you. They've missed you before, they've had those nights. No, what shifted was understanding. They started to see you the way that third parties saw you, from the outside with clarity, without all the noise of pride and hurt and ego getting in the way. And what they saw was someone who had been steady, someone who had cared in real ways. Someone they had taken for granted in ways they hadn't been able to admit until that moment. That's the part that hit hardest, not the memory of you, the realization that you'd been more than they'd allowed themselves to see. And this is the part they're still trying to understand. Why now? Why did it take someone else's voice to say it for them to feel it? Why did one offhand comment from a person who barely knew the full story manage to crack open something they'd kept sealed shut for months? They couldn't explain it to themselves. They tried. They sat in their car later, after leaving early. Yes, they left earlier than usual, that's another detail. They sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel, and tried to make sense of what had happened to them. And they couldn't, because some realizations don't come through logic. They come through timing. They come through a moment your soul was finally ready for, even if your mind wasn't. And last night, your person was ready. Not by choice, not by plan, just by the slow, quiet accumulation of every unspoken thought they'd been pushing down. What happened next was subtle, but it mattered more than they realized. They picked up their phone. They didn't text you. Don't get the wrong idea. They didn't reach out. They just looked. They scrolled. They went somewhere, a thread of old messages, a photo, something. And they sat with it. They read words you'd written months ago, or maybe longer. They looked at a picture they'd never deleted, even when they told themselves they should. And they felt the weight of every choice they'd made since the last time things were good between you. Then they put the phone down, face down, like the screen itself was too much. If this resonates, let it settle in you for a second. You don't need to do anything with it yet. Just feel it, because here's the thing nobody talks about. When someone realizes they were wrong about how they treated you, the first reaction is rarely to reach out. The first reaction is shame. Quiet, private shame. The kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe normally for a few minutes. And your person felt that. They felt it deeply. Not because they're a bad person, but because they finally understood, in a way they hadn't before, that they hadn't shown up the way you deserved. That's a heavy realization to land on someone in the middle of an ordinary night. And this is where the regret started settling in. Not loud regret, not the kind people perform when they want sympathy. The quiet kind. The kind that sits down next to you and doesn't say much, but won't leave either. They thought about all the moments they had been distant when you needed them close. The times they had assumed you'd always be there, so they didn't bother showing up the way they could have. The version of themselves they had been when you were still in their life, and the version of themselves they wished they had been. They didn't beat themselves up. That's not what this was. It was more like grief. Grief for a version of the relationship that could have existed if they'd been more present, more aware, more willing. Stay with this, because something subtle is unfolding here that the script of their life is rewriting in real time. There's a strange peace that comes with this kind of regret, eventually. Not at first. At first it just hurts. But after a while, it transforms into something useful. It transforms into clarity. And what your person is experiencing right now, even if they couldn't put words to it, is the beginning of that clarity. The understanding that what you had wasn't something they should have been so quick to walk away from, or so casual about, or so confident they could replace, because that's the other thing they were realizing last night. Nothing has replaced what you brought into their life. Not the people they've been spending time with, not the new conversations, not the distractions. There's a specific kind of presence you had, and they're starting to understand that it wasn't ordinary. It wasn't replaceable. It wasn't something they could find again just by looking elsewhere. And that's a lonely realization to have at a table full of people. Why did hearing your name from someone else hit like that? They kept circling back to that question. And the answer they couldn't quite say out loud was this: because it made you real again. It made you a person other people noticed too. Not just a memory they were keeping in private. It pulled you out of the quiet box they'd put you in and reminded them that you exist, fully, in the world, with or without them. And that thought, the thought of you living your life, healing, growing, becoming someone they no longer get to witness up close. That was the thought that stayed with them after they got home. They sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, lights still off, just sat there. Feeling something that didn't have a name yet. If you've felt this shift too, on your end, you already understand what this kind of moment carries. Because while they were sitting with all of that, you might have felt something on your side too. A strange restlessness last night, a name flickering in your mind, a dream you can't quite remember, a song that came on at exactly the wrong or right moment. These things aren't random. They're the quiet way connection works when two people share something real, even if they're not currently together. The energy between them doesn't switch off the way the silence between them does. And here's what's so important about all this. Your person is not going to admit any of it. Not tomorrow, not next week, maybe not for a long time. They might wake up and convince themselves the whole night was just the alcohol, just the mood, just a passing weakness. They'll try to put the lid back on. That's what people do when they're scared of what they're feeling. They reach for the easiest explanation that lets them keep moving forward without having to change. But something has already changed. They can't undo last night. They can't unhear what was said. They can't unfeel what hit them. And every time, they try to convince themselves it didn't matter. The memory of how quiet they got at that table is going to come back to them. Their own silence is going to be the evidence they can't argue with. This is the part they're going to keep returning to in the days ahead. The way they reacted, the way they couldn't react, the way they sat there frozen for half a second longer than they should have. What happens next isn't loud, but it shapes everything. Slowly, carefully, almost without noticing, they're going to start seeing you differently. Not in a sweeping, cinematic way, in small ways, in the way they hesitate before deleting an old message, in the way they pause when a song you liked comes on, in the way they rehearse what they might say if they ever ran into you, even though they keep telling themselves they wouldn't say anything at all. The mind keeps writing the script. The heart keeps editing it. And at some point, and this is where things start to feel like more than just emotion, they're going to feel a pull to reach out. Not because they planned to. Not because they figured out the right words. Just because the feeling will get loud enough that ignoring it starts to feel worse than acting on it. It might come as a small message, a simple check-in, a line that pretends to be casual but isn't. They'll try to make it sound like nothing, but you'll be able to tell, because you know them. And the version of them that reaches out from this place will be different from the version you remember. Stay with that for a moment, because there's something almost gentle about this kind of timing. The way life lets people sit with what they need to sit with before bringing them back around. The way certain truths can only land when a person is finally quiet enough to hear them. Last night your person got quiet, and the truth landed. There's a verse that's been sitting with me as I tell you this. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not on our timeline, not when we want it. In its time. And maybe that's the gentle reminder underneath all of this, that the silence you've been carrying, the waiting, the wondering, the not understanding why things played out the way they did, none of it has been wasted. Something has been ripening, and last night, a small piece of it finally cracked open in someone else's chest. You don't need to force anything from this. You don't need to send a message. You don't need to do anything differently than what your heart is already telling you. Because what's happening on their end is happening with or without your effort. That's how you know it's real. The moments that need your manipulation aren't usually the ones meant for you. The moments meant for you unfold on their own, quietly, slowly, like last night did on their end, and what you've been doing, the work, the healing, the growing, the choosing of yourself, none of that has gone unnoticed. Not by life, not by the universe, not by them, even when it seemed like they weren't paying attention. The version of you that exists right now is the version they're starting to remember. And that version is harder to walk away from than they realized. Here's the quiet transformation underneath all of this. They went into last night thinking they were okay. They came home from last night realizing they had been performing okay for a long time. There's a difference, and you can't unsee that difference once you've seen it. They can't go back to pretending. They can try. They might even succeed for a while. But every time someone says your name from now on, something is going to flicker in their face that they can't fully hide. The cost of the pretending is going to keep rising. That's what shifted last night. Not a confession, not a grand decision, not a phone call. Just a small, quiet recognition that the way they treated what you had wasn't the way they should have treated it. And recognition is the first step. It's not the end, it's the beginning. And beginnings are slow. Beginnings are full of false starts. But beginnings are also where everything real starts to take shape. So if you've been feel something in the air today, a heaviness, a softness, a strange sense that something has moved without your permission, that's why. Something has moved, not in a way you can see yet, in the kind of way that only reveals itself later, when you look back and realize this was the week things started to be different. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to grip it. You don't have to interpret every signal. Just keep being who you've been becoming. Keep choosing yourself. Keep softening into the version of you that doesn't need to perform anything for anyone. Because that's the version of you that they're slowly being drawn back toward. The steady one, the real one, the one whose absence has been louder in their life than they want to admit. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.